Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate. I'm so happy that you're with me because I have an extraordinary guest, our very own Bob Williams. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Kate. It's a joy to be here.
It's so nice to have you here. I think almost everybody knows that in addition to being a St. James parishioner, you're also in a really interesting role at our diocesan offices here in Los Angeles. Can you give us your title?
Yes, I feel fortunate that Bishop John Harvey Taylor, our diocesan bishop,
Mhm.
asked me to serve as Canon for Common Life. And I love that connection because it brings together communications, the interfaith ministries portfolio, and our history and special projects as assigned, but the common life, the things that unite us as a diocese.
Yes, the things that unite us as well, the common life of the diocese, right? Actually, that makes me want to jump into a question. I know I want to scroll back in a second and ask you more about how you came to St. James and your backstory, but just for people who might be watching this who don't know our world, what is a diocese?
Well, a diocese is one of the most efficient organizations of churches that I know of. It's a very practical configuration. As we know, our Episcopal Church comes from the Greek word episkopos, or overseer or bishop. So,
Hmm.
from the earliest church days, each bishop oversaw a diocese, and bishops continue to oversee dioceses. And it's very much a
Hmm.
pastoral connection. So, we're not a congregational church and
Hmm.
independent in that sense, but we're interconnected and interdependent as a diocese.
So we're independent and interdependent. I like that idea.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
and um, and each diocese has its own bishop or bishops, and we have two right now. So,
Yeah.
so we'll talk more about our bishops and many other bishops that have been part of your fascinating career. But first, are you a native Angelino or a native Californian, or are you from somewhere else?
Well, I am a native Californian. My father's family are the longtime Californians, so I'm fourth generation Californian. And,
Wow.
moved to Los Angeles in 1979, so that's a little over 40 years ago. I feel like a native Angelino.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Well, if you moved to LA in 1979, you've seen LA go through many changes.
Yes, yes, and more so, I'd say my grandparents, my mother's parents who raised me, they left Los Angeles after the war to go down to San Diego County, to North San Diego
Mhm.
County Vista, where they had an avocado and citrus ranch, and it was called the
Oh,
Indian Rock
wow.
Ranch. And so my mother was born at that time and grew up there in that very rural setting. My grandfather had a lumber yard and a business supply business,
Hmm.
which was good in the post-war building boom. So, and then along
Yeah.
I came, and I very much enjoyed growing up in rural San Diego County. Uh,
Mm.
Sadly, my mother died when I was 10, and my sister was
Yeah.
5. And so, thankfully, our grandparents took us over, and it was sadness, but we had a very, very happy and positive upbringing.
Were you still living on the avocado and citrus ranch at that point?
No, actually, I never lived there. My mother did, and the folks
Mhm.
sold that ranch and then did other things. But
I'd love it
I
if we
see
could see a
pictures.
photograph. I know, I know. I would be done for if I lived on an avocado ranch. um, I'm wondering if we could see a photo of your lovely grandmother. That's her name was Betty Perry.
Oh, there
One
she
of the
is.
one of the great shining lights of your life, I think. I've heard you speak of her many times.
Yes, she's the single greatest influence in my life. She was the most generous person I know, had a sense of humor off the charts, and
Mm.
cared deeply about people, was practical. She herself was a journalist, and she wrote for the local paper
Oh,
and had a column. And my grandfather
I
was
didn't know
active
that.
in the Chamber of Commerce, and so they were kind of pillars of the community, and
Mm.
but so accessible and friendly and warm.
That's
So
such a blessing,
glad.
isn't it, for you and your sister that you had, even though you lost your mom, you had that kind of warm upbringing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
We were
Well,
fortunate.
how about St. James? When was it that you first walked through the door at St. James? I think it was quite a few years ago. You're such a
Well, we
young
were
fellow.
now we were just kind of adding that up, that it's been 35 years. Um, this very month of February that I first came through the doors of St. James. And I
Wow.
must say, the doors of St. James were more fortress-like than at that time. The neighborhood was different, and
Yeah.
no, but I was assigned to do a story for the Episcopal News at St. James on the new Jubilee Center that had opened with the Caring Hands program, and a lot of care was provided for the homeless and hungry. And so the
Mm.
Episcopal Church at the national or churchwide level named St. James a Jubilee Center. And
What
from
does
that
Jubilee
point,
Center mean? What does it mean to be a Jubilee Center?
it goes back to the Old Testament concept of the year
Hmm.
of Jubilee, and that people are made whole by the care of others. And
Mm.
so across the church, in different dioceses, Jubilee centers were established, and everyone felt very proud at St. James of becoming a Jubilee center. Uh,
Absolutely. That's thrilling.
mhm.
And so you walked in the door to do this story,
Yes.
and there you are in that era, right?
Yes, I'm
What a
probably working on that
cutie.
issue of the paper.
That's right. You're on your IBM. What is that? What is that machine that you're at there?
It is a CompuGraphic photo typesetter. We thought we were so uptown having that clunky thing. But that's
Oh
how I
my
came to
gosh.
work for
Well,
the diocese, Kate. That's
yeah.
how I came to work for the diocese, was being able to use one of those CompuGraphic typesetters. And
I
my
remember you told me this amazing story that you were actually calling the diocese to ask a question, and you ended up with
yes,
a job. Isn't that right?
that's how it happened. I called to subscribe to the Episcopal News, which I later went on to edit. But the person who answered the phone was Ruth Nicastro, my great mentor, and the second, after my grandmother, the second most influential person in my
Yeah.
whole life. Ruth
Mm.
changed everything by hiring me. But I called to subscribe to the paper, and I said, I'm working on a project at journalism school, and I'm wondering how many you have on your staff in your nonprofit communication office. And Ruth said, well, you're speaking with her. And
There she is.
there's
Here's
Ruth
a
now.
photograph of Ruth.
Ruth with Dr. Runcie, Robert Runcie, the Archbishop of Canterbury. They were great friends and colleagues.
Nice.
And through Ruth's association, we learned a lot more about the Anglican Communion. It was a delight. And Dr. Runcie was, like Ruth, one of the funniest and smartest people we ever met. Here's
But
Ruth
meanwhile,
in,
here you are on the phone trying to get subscribed, and she ends up asking you to come in that very day, I think, wasn't it? Or something like that.
well, once she learned that I could use this kind of a typesetter, she said, you don't use a CompuGraphic blah, blah typesetter, do you? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. And she said, won't you come for an interview on Tuesday? And sure enough, I went for an interview on Tuesday. And on February 10, 1986, that was my first day on the job.
That is amazing, amazing, amazing. And it turns out that that conversation with her opened up for you a whole world of sort of journalism and communications and common life building in the Episcopal Church, right?
Yes, it did. And I had studied journalism in school, and it was at SC then getting my master's. And previously, I'd worked for a construction trade press. It was called
Mm-hmm.
Building News Incorporated. That was my first job out of college, and
Mm-hmm.
really had a good experience there covering trade and
Mm-hmm.
construction activities.
Mm. Now, you've been at St. James for many, many years, and before we went on the air, we were just realizing that you've worked with a lot of bishops, I mean, a lot of you've known a lot of rectors at St. James. And isn't it true that St. James is kind of a bishop factory?
Well, that's one way to put it. That's five of the 10, you being our 10th rector, and our best one yet. I'm definitely sure of that.
I bet
With
you say
respect
that
to
to
all the
all the
others.
rectors.
No, with respect to all the others. And yes, five of them have been bishops, and I knew three of them fairly well and appreciated them. Bishop Barrett, I knew in retirement. I of course, didn't know him when he was in place, and Bishop Curtis, who became suffragan in our diocese and then went on to be Bishop of Olympia in the Seattle.
Mm, mm.
Bishop Barrett was Bishop of Rochester, New York, before he resigned that post and came, and he was in residence in Santa Barbara for many years at Trinity. And then, of course, our own Kirk Smith, who went on to be
Yes,
Bishop of
Arizona.
Arizona. But
Yeah,
the first,
that's
yeah,
incredible. That's
Kate,
incredible.
the first rector of St. James, Father Porter, he went to be Bishop of Sacramento area. And then another one, Father Terwilliger, went to be Bishop of Dallas. So we had those five rectors who went on to be bishops.
Wow. That is amazing, amazing.
Mhm.
And why do you think it is that St. James Church churns out so many bishops? Is it in the
Well, I
water?
think it might be in the water. I think it's in the high caliber of ministry that the congregation has always been involved with. It's
Mm.
been a place for leaders of our city, leaders of our region, and there was always a premium placed on having, I think, the best possible and most qualified rector. You know, I think of when I came to St. James for that first story, Bob Oliver was our rector,
Mm.
the rector of the parish, because I became a parishioner later after that. But of course, Bob was distinguished as the dean of the American Cathedral in Paris and was
Paris.
very,
Yes.
very pastoral connection with Wallace Simpson, who was in the congregation. And Bob had a lot of, Father Oliver had a lot of interesting stories from his ministry there.
Wow, that is amazing. Uh, in fact, isn't it one of the priests at All Saints, aren't they in Paris now?
Oh, yes, Nat Katz, our great friend.
Yeah.
He
Is he
went
at the
from All Saints
cathedral?
Beverly Hills to serve at the American Cathedral. Yes.
Sweet guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we've churned out a lot of bishops, and you've worked with and known a lot of bishops. If you're, being in the church for your entire career, basically, except for the
Yeah.
first job, you've known a lot of bishops. I thought it'd be fun for us to just take a little journey through the bishops with some visuals here. Um, Here's the first one. Tell us about this fellow.
Oh, Bishop Roussack. Bishop Roussack. All of our bishops have been wonderful, and I felt a real camaraderie and appreciation and great respect for Bishop Roussack. He was bishop, I think, starting in about 1974. And of course, he was in office when the prayer book revision was adopted by the General Convention, and also the ordination of women was authorized. And at first, he
Mm.
was not in favor of the ordination of women, but he came around in his views, and he came to appreciate and admire the role of women in ministry. And this was a major turn in the life of the diocese. You know, at that time, under his administration, there were four congregations in which the majority of members voted to disaffiliate with the Episcopal Church. And this, of course, was repeated later on in more recent history.
Wait, wait,
But
wait. So four churches that wanted to disaffiliate because of the possibility of women being ordained?
because of the reality of women being
Because of
ordained
oh wow, that's
and
amazing.
the changes in the prayer book language, uh, two of those,
Sorry.
that's all right. I love hearing your dog. Uh, yes, two of those churches, the court awarded them back to the diocese, but two, the court ruled that they could be independent. St. Mary of the Angels in Los Feliz and the Church of Our Savior in Carthay Circle
Which
did
is
not return to the.
literally 1 block from where I live, and I walk by that church every day, and I just think to myself, you missed out, guys.
So Bishop Roussack, and he was very involved in the Anglican Communion and a great welcomer of cultures, welcomer of the Southeast Asian refugees, for example. And what I'd like to say about Bishop Roussack, too, it was one of the saddest days of my working career. He died in office, and he developed a period of illness, and he was only 60 when he died in 1986.
Wow.
I'd just been there about 6 months in the job, and we lost Bishop Roussack. And so
Yeah.
I
Well,
feel
you know what I
fortunate.
think? Yeah. To have worked
I
with
would,
him. What I want to say about people like Bishop Roussack is it's so powerful to see somebody in a position of authority like that have a change of heart,
yes,
because it's such a great form of modeling for other people to know
yes,
that his ideas could change.
yes. And I would like to say what a privilege it's been to remain friends through these many years with Bishop Roussack's son, Jeffrey, and his wife, Allison, and also with Bishop
Mm,
Roussack's daughter, Becca Waycott, and her husband,
mm.
Ralph. They're such
Oh,
fine
that's
people.
wonderful. Wonderful. Let's see who is next in the
Well,
parade of bishops here.
because that's quite a picture of,
Who
in the
who
center
we
is
seeing here?
Bishop Garver is in the center, and Bishop Garver was interim. The standing committee made him interim on the death of Bishop Roussack, and he served for the better part of 2 years as an
Mm.
ecclesiastical authority and our leader. He was suffragan, but he was also acting bishop, and so we had a very good period. I think this was about the last picture of him before he died in the 90s. Bishop Anderson, who assisted in our diocese, retired of Minnesota, is there with us, and I need a
I
haircut, it
see.
looks like.
No, 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 no. You've got this. You've got a real Hugh Grant thing going on there with the floppy. I love it.
Bishop
All right, let's
Garver.
see. Who's up next? Who's up next? Who's
Uh,
this?
Fred and Barbara Borsch, two such
Tell
fine
us
people.
about. Yeah, tell us about Bishop Borge.
Bishop Borsch came to us. He had been the dean of the chapel at Princeton. He was a Princeton alum. And he had been the dean of the Church Divinity School of the Pacific in Berkeley. And his spouse, Barbara, had many career distinctions herself. She was the deployment officer in the Diocese of New Jersey and a very skilled, capable professional. And Bishop Borsch, uh, I can't say enough about his ability to move the diocese forward and to deal with the various factions that had kind of grown up around, especially about the full inclusion of gay and lesbian, LGBTQ
Mm,
people. Fred
mm,
was masterful in that. He was masterful
wonderful.
in everything that he did. And I'm forever indebted to him because when Ruth Nicastro retired, he hired me to be the communications director. And that was after a
Oh,
national search. So I had to compete. I had to show my credentials and my abilities. But I was
wow,
never
that's
so honored.
wonderful. Well, he was very wise and discerning. Who do we have? Who do we have next? Who
Oh,
is this? I
speaking of
love
wise
these
and discerning,
specimens.
oh,
Hmm.
Chet Talton, who is our bishop suffragan. This is on the day that the Cathedral Center was consecrated in Echo Park. And that was one of the triumphs of Bishop Borsch and Bishop Talton's administrations was the development of the Cathedral Center. And it's now known, of course, as St. Paul's Commons, but it has the same
Hmm.
components of the Retreat Center and the diocesan offices. It was one of the
Right.
most thrilling things and positive things that I was ever involved in my career.
And for those of you who've never visited uh, the St. Paul's Commons. It's right on the banks of the Echo Park Lake, and you can just see the fountains and are they swan boats or just paddle boats?
Well, they're paddle boats and they're styled as swans. They light up at
There's,
night, so
yeah, that's
it's a
right. It's just
lovely
a
scene.
beautiful spot. It's a great place for people watching, and maybe people do or don't know that we have a fabulous retreat center there.
Yes.
That Do you need to be an Episcopal organization to have your retreat there?
No, anyone can book a conference or a retreat, and mercifully, with the vaccine coming, uh, we'll be back open again in time to host events.
Great.
But it's a
Can't
place of
wait.
great hospitality. That's what Bishop Borsch
It
always
is.
says, that it was a place of great hospitality.
That's wonderful. And see the next bishop in our
Oh, yes.
cavalcade of bishops. I know this is John Bruno.
John Bruno, whose idea it was to build the Cathedral Center or St. Paul's Commons at Echo Park. He woke up
Hmm.
in the middle of the night, he said, and jostled Mary, who's there in the picture with him, his lovely wife, Mary, and said, "Hey, I've got an idea." And so he had plans drawn and he approached Bishop Borsch, who made it possible. And that's how the Cathedral Center came along. And my great colleague, Christy Wallace, who's a canon of the Cathedral Center, she was the executive director and brought the project to completion. So
Wonderful,
between the three of
wonderful.
them, what a team. And you see him pictured here with the senior managers of the Neighborhood Youth Association, which is an
Yes.
institution of our diocese. So
Is it a part of
Bishop,
our diocese or a separate nonprofit?
it's a separate nonprofit and affiliated institution. It's now the oldest since Good Samaritan Hospital has become independent in recent years. I think the last year, Neighborhood Youth Association is the oldest of the diocesan institutions.
Wonderful, wonderful group that you do so much to support. I know it's very dear to your heart, and we'll talk about it more in a little bit. But let's keep on with our bishops because we have. Oh, there's
Yes,
another picture of Bishop Bruno and Bishop Bruce, and tell us about the
and
other bishop in this picture.
Bishop Mary Glasspool, who is now uh, assistant bishop in the Diocese of New York. Bishop Bruce and Bishop Glasspool were elected at the same diocesan convention in 2009 and were consecrated in 2010. And here, of course, they're pictured with Bishop Bruno, who was diocesan at that time. And
Mm.
these three and Bishop Bruno, even well before the election of the two suffragans, did so much in helping the church come together and reckon with another fracture that occurred, this time over the ordination of the openly gay Bishop of New Hampshire. And
Gene
at that time,
Robinson, right.
Eugene Robinson, yes, there were 4 congregations within our diocese within which the majority of members voted to disaffiliate from the diocese. So it was a repeat in some respects of the 1970s. But
Mm.
Bishop Bruno was tenacious and just so successful in establishing legal precedent, whereby it was affirmed that congregations, people could leave the Episcopal Church, but they could not take the property with them. So, in addition to his many other gifts and skills as a pastor, generous, caring, wonderful leader, uh, he accomplished those things. And of course, Bishop Bruce continues today as our very skilled bishop suffragan. And so we're delighted. I'm delighted to be able to work with her.
She is such a good friend to St. James and has helped us in so many ways. We're always learning from her about more about church finance, and also, of course, her commitment to multiculturalism is so
Yes,
inspiring.
it's
So
inspiring. And Kate, I would add too that with Bishop Glasspool, as some of the listeners will know, that she was the first openly partnered lesbian to be elected an Episcopal bishop. And so this was
I did not know that.
This was a historic time in the life of the diocese and the wider church, and so it required some careful communication and press work, which we all
So,
pulled together.
so may I ask, during the Gene Robinson uh, conflict, right?
Yes,
Nationally or internationally, was she out at that stage? Was it well known that she
yes,
was a partnered lesbian?
yes,
Okay.
yes. She was out the whole time, and this is a good time to mention, too, that during Bishop Bruno's tenure, uh, with his full support, I was able to serve at the denominational level as communications director for the Episcopal Church. And I had offices in New York and Los Angeles, and directed the Episcopal News Service, which many
Wow.
people receive today. And so those 4 years were kind of bookended within Bishop Bruno's tenure.
Mm,
But I felt so encouraged to be able to go and do that, and then to be welcomed back when it was time for me to return. And so,
yeah.
but what I would say about that in those period of years, I observed the fissures in the church from the denominational level and the general convention. And serving as press officer, that was a challenging time. However, we've made it through, and we're in a better place going forward.
We
So,
are. We're in a great place. And do we have any other bishop shots here? We do. We have
oh
our
yes, our beloved John Harvey Taylor and
beloved John
beloved
Harvey Taylor.
Kathy
Well,
O'Connor,
just
his
let's see.
spouse, Canon Kathy.
Great
What a
bishops.
pleasure to work with these two. Uh,
Mm,
our new, well, he's been bishop now since 2017, and here he is
yeah.
with Bishop Bruce and Canon Melissa McCarthy, our canon to the ordinary, the
Yes.
triad. And what a
The
thrill and a pleasure
triad,
it is.
the wonderful triad. I am constantly astounded here in the Diocese of Los Angeles how accessible our bishops are. I mean, I
Yes,
can text questions and get answers the next day or the next hour. I mean, in other dioceses, I think the access is much more guarded, but here it's so open. I love that.
the access is open, and it's been so important, talking about the value of a diocese. It comes clear in these terrible times we're living in, hopeful
Mm.
now that there's a vaccine for the COVID pandemic. But what
Yes,
we've been able to do as a diocese coming together under the leadership of our bishops and Canon McCarthy has been far more than any one congregation could do. I
and
give you the example.
we need that guide. I personally, I'm so grateful for our we have these clergy calls every other week, and it's such important guidance from them about how to proceed in the midst of this pandemic. But you had an example you were going to share.
Oh, that's certainly part of it. I was thinking of the Paycheck Protection Program that all the mission
Yes.
congregations were able to qualify for. It was a
Mhm.
miracle. And this is, part of the considerable value of the diocese, that the congregations that are smaller and more challenged financially are helped by the congregations with more resources. And this comes to us
Mhm.
through our Mission Share Fund, in which we all
Mm.
participate. And St. James is such a faithful contributor to the Mission Share Fund. It's
Well, we're
part of our
trying. We're
identity.
trying. Yeah. It's
Well, it's
we will try to do better, but it's so important. I totally understand that. All right, now we're hopping through history here, but what I'd like to do now is take a quick visit to a moment in time, and that was a conference in England that's held every 10 years,
mm,
and it's called Lambeth. Can you just say a little bit about what that is? We won't spend a lot of time on this, but I want to sort of drill down to the controversy that particular year for you back in 1998 and what it was all about. So what is Lambeth?
well, the Lambeth Conference of Bishops brings together Anglican bishops or Episcopal, the terms are, of course, interchangeable, from around the world. And this has been true since 1867. About every 10 years,
Mm,
the Archbishop of Canterbury convenes the Lambeth Conference. It's been delayed this year, of course, recent 2 years because of the COVID pandemic. But I believe it's in 2022 that the Lambeth Conference
Mm,
will move forward. But we talked earlier about Dr. Runcie, Robert Runcie, Archbishop of
mhm,
Canterbury. And that was in 1978. That is when the Diocese of Los Angeles became even more active than the diocese was in the international world. I
mm,
don't want to discount the previous bishops and their role at Lambeth, which was substantial in the 20s, 30s, 40s, Bishop Stevens and Bishop Loy and so on.
mm,
Uh, but in 1998, uh, as we can recall, there was much tension
mm,
over full inclusion of LGBTQ persons in the life of the church. And there was
mm,
much polarization around that issue. Before I go into that, I want to go to the very positive note that we feel at St. James, that we are such
mm.
a diverse parish, and we're
Yes.
joined in one of the mottos of the Anglican Communion, which is bonds of affection. We're united in
Mm,
bonds of affection. And this is so true of our African fellowship and our Korean
yeah.
community and the whole congregation together. So, coming from a
And
blissful
don't
experience.
forget our motto too of embracing. Well, now I'm forgetting our. What is it that we say? The dignity of every human being,
Oh,
respecting
yes,
the dignity of
respecting the
every human being.
dignity and embracing it too, the dignity of every human
Yeah,
being, right from our prayer book. So,
yeah.
this is uh, where I'm going with this is not all aspects or corners of the Anglican Communion feel the bonds of affection as we do at St. James. And so,
That's a good
at
way of
that,
putting it. Yeah.
I believe it with all my heart. And there's a learning that goes on. I mean, as you well know, as you've lived all over the world with different cultural experiences, there's a learning that needs to occur. And the Lambeth Conference offers that kind of learning for bishops around the
Ah,
world. And
I
in
see. So the idea
1990,
is if the bishops can hang out with each other and pray together and eat together and all of that, then there'll be more mutual understanding, right?
yes, an example of that was the ordination of women. And in the Lambeth conferences of 78 and 88, that was dealt with in an educational way and in a consensus building way. Yes, there were bishops who were dead set against those developments. However, there was a coming together and a coalescing that was different than in 1998 when I served as the editor of the daily newspaper.
Mm,
There was much polarization, as I said, around
mm.
LGBTQ inclusion. And I think, if I may be so bold to say, the mistake of the Lambeth Conference was legislating around it.
The vote.
And
Yeah.
so we came out with Resolution Lambeth 110 that said that homosexuality was incompatible with Scripture. And of course, we did not believe that. I did not believe that. A lot of people did not believe that, but some people did. And anyhow, the polarization that continued from 1998 on for the next 2 decades at least has been substantial.
Yeah. So I can see why it's very important to gather, and it is a terrible shame that a question like that was brought to a vote instead of um, a more of an ongoing mutual learning and conversation. Let's take
Mhm.
a quick pause here to say, um, what is you said a minute ago that the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion are interchangeable, but that's not quite true. The Anglican Communion is the biggest umbrella, right?
Yes, that's right. Um, what I meant by that is that Anglican and Episcopal bishops are essentially the
Mhm.
same. If one is an
Yeah,
Episcopal bishop, he or she is an Anglican bishop, much
right.
like us as parishioners. We're Episcopalians, and you know, I know you're aware of this, that uh, at the time of the American Revolution, that's where the term Episcopal was added to the church, because anything of English heritage, we could not be Anglicans according to the
Mhm.
framers of the Constitution. And
Right.
so Episcopal, and our first bishops, as some will remember, were ordained by, consecrated by bishops from Scotland.
Scotland,
So
I know. Isn't that a fun fact? And
yes,
it's
and
go ahead.
yeah, Scotland, of course, the church is the Scottish Episcopal Church, and so they use that term as
Mm.
well. Um,
Now, the Episcopal Church, though, is not only here in the United States, right? It's in how many other nations?
well, we say 16 nations, which is true. There are Episcopal. We talked about the American Cathedral in the Convocation of
In
the Church in Europe.
Paris.
Yes, and um, there are some areas that have become their own autonomous provinces, such as Brazil, which was formerly part of the Episcopal Church. Cuba has recently realigned again with the Episcopal Church. And
Isn't that
so,
nice? What about
yes.
Jerusalem?
Oh, the Diocese of Jerusalem in the Middle East, it's part of the autonomous province of Jerusalem and the Middle East, of
Mm,
which Suhail Douani is Archbishop there in
mm,
Jerusalem. He's
yes.
visited St. James in 2012. Bishop Douani
All
came to
right.
St.
That there is a segue because who hasn't visited St. James is what I all I have to say. And I thought it might be fun at this moment for us to just take a peek at a quick video. If people can remember when Princess Diana died, when was that? What year was that? Do you
It was
remember?
19. I want to say it was 1997 because it was the year before the Lambeth
It
Conference, if
was.
I
It
remember
was
correctly.
1997. Princess Diana died, and we ended up having a service in memory of her here at St. James. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. Our great friend Angus Mackay, who is a parishioner at
Angus
St.
Mackay.
Bede's, and he was Vice Consul for Public Affairs of the British Consulate General in Los Angeles. And he asked if such a service could be co-sponsored by the Consulate General, by St. James, and by the diocese. And so we said yes, and Kirk Smith went to work right away on bringing that
Okay.
service together. And it was a very memorable and a very significant and holy time.
It
I see
was, and
here some
here's
footage.
some footage. Yeah, and
Yes,
maybe people will can guess who is wearing that hat. There were a few celebrities there that day, and we'll see another. I'll give you another chance in a minute, folks, to spot. But here's our all of our wonderful.
yes. The church was full, of course, and there were people outside. There were
Um,
200 media people there that day. And here's
wow.
Michael
Yes,
York,
a
and
famous English actor.
mhm, giving the eulogy. And of course,
Wonderful.
Jim Buonamani providing the music for this was exceptional.
Yes. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
and
I'm sure.
yeah,
Oh, the
fanfare from
music is
the
amazing.
yes, very memorable day. And there's Bishop Talton who presided.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. And
And
there's
here, of
our
course,
one of our celebrities.
I would have loved to
Michael
be
Jackson.
That
in
was Michael
England,
Jackson was
but it
there
was
that
a
day.
wonderful ceremony. It was very beautiful.
And there's our Bob Williams holding the door for Michael Jackson. Wow. That's wonderful. And while we're talking about really special moments, I'm wondering if we can jump to a very special night at Disney Hall. Now, I know that this is um, one of the most delightful moments that you've probably experienced in your work career because this was your idea. Tell us about it.
Kate, it was my idea, and I'm so proud of it. I can't believe that it came together. But I was
I
there.
can.
Phil Smith, another great friend of our congregation and
Oh,
retired now
yes.
out of Palm Springs, he was the conservator of the organ at the Disney Hall. And of course, Manuel Rosales was the builder, one of the co-builders as he was at St. James with the organ. And I had the idea, how would it be for the 150th anniversary of parish ministry, the Episcopal Church's parish ministry in Los Angeles, if we could
Mhm.
gather at the Disney Hall and share together an evening. And the choir came from 6 parishes where music had been, great leadership in music. And those 6 choir masters were named canons of the Cathedral Center. at the time.
Mm.
And here's yours truly on the rostrum when one of our planning
On
days.
the roster. Well, we actually have a clip of a moment when our own canon, Jim Buonamani, is conducting. And how many voices would you say were singing?
Well, the hall seats more than 2,000, and there were 200 voices in the choir. It was the largest choir
Amazing.
ever assembled in the history of the Disney Hall.
Mm. Yes, and I think there it is. I get chills every time I watch this. Wow, 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 wow. And amazing. And some of the members of our choir, even today, were part of that. I spotted
Yes,
Kara Morgan. I know many other people were there. Justin, I think, was singing there as well.
yes, yes. I was just going to say Justin was
What
there.
an
And
unforgettable experience. Wow.
well,
And
mhm. Sorry.
go ahead. No, you
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to say that expression of praise summed up everything that I felt about the privilege of being of service in the diocese. It's all about the praise of God and how we experience God in Christ. And to have all of the congregations come together in that way was just a splendid, splendid affirmation of the Episcopal Church, which is such a jewel in the life of our region and the life of our nation. Think of our Washington National Cathedral, places like the Old North Church in Boston, Christ Church,
Yeah.
Philadelphia, on and on we can go. It's just a jewel, and we need to work as hard as we can to support and maintain its capacity for what comes next. And I think
Yes.
too, Kate, that uh, in these times of political polarization, the
Mm.
Episcopal Church has a unique role, and presiding Bishop Michael Curry is leading us forward with
Mm.
his way of love and out of many voices one, these initiatives. Also in our own diocese, Bishop Taylor and Canon Susan Russell have one in the spirit, engaging
Mm.
across difference. And I think this has always been part of the great charism of the Episcopal Church, that it bridges differences. And we're called
It
upon to do
does.
that.
It does. We are
Yes,
we are a we are a very diverse group of people. Not
we
there's no lockstep uh, group think, but it
Kate,
is that attempt to try to live in love. Yes.
that's exactly right. There's one other aspect I'd like to go back to about the balconies and Jim conducting so beautifully.
Yes. Okay,
You
let's
know,
hear it.
another mentor of mine through the years has been George Regas, who was the rector of All Saints Church in Pasadena, where I attended before I joined St. James formally in the
Mm,
2000s. But Dr. Regas, our rector, who he's just died last month
I
at age
know.
90, and
Mm.
he called us frequently to realize that we are in one another's balconies. I certainly am in your balcony cheering you on constantly, and I know
Oh,
you're in mine. And I think that all of
absolutely.
us together, this is just a beautiful metaphor, and that was brought home by the balcony scenes there with Jim conducting. Jim has been in my balcony, as you know, he's one of my closest friends. I think
Yes.
of him as an older brother. He always has good advice for me, and
He always
so
is. And he's such a prince among men. I thank God every day that I get to know somebody like Jim Buonamani. Such a towering talent and such a beautiful person. And
in
you
his
are a
25th,
tolerant. And it's in his 25th year at St. James in the city. I know. It's amazing. I think we're going to celebrate that more post COVID. It's kind of hard to really celebrate something remotely. There's so many
Kate,
things that we have to celebrate, though.
it occurs to me that St. James has had 11 rectors, and at many times in years past, Jim has performed that ministry of guiding the congregation forward in worship and praise. And I
Yes.
just think he's remarkable in every way.
He is. He is. And he does give great advice. I agree with that too. You've talked a lot about mentors. You've talked about Ruth, and you've also talked about your grandmother, Betty Perry. You've talked about George Regis, and we didn't get to talk about your other mentor, Barbara.
Oh, let's do talk about Barbara Braver. Nothing would make me
Just
happier.
a quick sentence, because we're heading into the home stretch here. But just give
That's
us a
fine.
sentence about why she was so precious to you.
Barbara was communications director. There she is with Frank, communications assistant to Bishop Frank Griswold, and also to presiding Bishop Ed Browning before Bishop Griswold was the presiding bishop. And Barbara, one of the great things I learned from Barbara is that our work in communications is about creating community, building community, and making meaning. And those
Yes.
two things I've carried forward. Barbara is, I would say, my spiritual director. She and
Oh.
Bishop Griswold, they have a way of showing up like magi. Just when you need a
Mm.
special gift from a wise person, the phone will ring or the email will come from one or the other. But
Isn't
I'm
that
just,
beautiful?
oh, they're
So
such good
beautiful,
friends.
so beautiful. I know.
Yeah.
So you've had great mentors, and
Mhm.
so I want to end on a note of something that I know a real personal passion of yours, and that is the Neighborhood Youth Association, because they are children that are being mentored into a really better future. Isn't that right?
It is right. And they mentor us too. They guide us with their example of resilience. We have 60 students enrolled in the Neighborhood Youth Association, and we specialize in 100% college placement for each
Love
one of
that.
our graduating
Love
seniors.
that.
Our,
Amazing.
Out of the 30 high schoolers right now, there are 6 who happen to be seniors. The others are underclassmen and women. But those 6 have now been accepted to 10 colleges and universities, 3 with full rides. And we're not even yet to the full, acceptances of March and April.
Right. That's
So I
incredible.
can't say enough about the work of the Neighborhood Youth Association. And I've been privileged to be the president of the board for the last 5 years at the invitation of Bishop Bruno.
Absolutely, and it's a piece of the much bigger mosaic of what common life looks like in a diocese. I know you do important interfaith work, and all of the kind of communications work, which has come a long way since that little machine that you were sitting at in the early photo.
Well, Kate, when you think of it, there were no cell phones at that time,
No
no
Wi-Fi.
email, none of
Yeah,
that. We had a electric typewriter and a telephone, and we got
yeah.
fax a couple of years later.
You
But
got
that's how we
fax.
did
Yeah,
it.
before that, it was just the Pony Express, right?
Right.
Well, you've come a long way. We're so glad that your journey has sort of threaded through the life of St. James in the City all the way along. You are a much loved vestry member, communications committee head here at St. James, and friend to us all, and friend to the diocese, and someone who's had a very interesting career on the whole international Episcopal scene. I know you probably don't even think about it that way, but you have. And I just want to thank you for all the ways that your life has been a life of service.
Kate, thank you so much. Such a privilege, and I look forward to keeping at it and keeping going as the years
Do it.
continue.
That's right. We need you. And thank you, and God bless you, Bob Williams. And goodbye and good night, everyone. Stay safe, and see you next week.